Okay, guys. So welcome to our workshop today. I have with me Katie Dunk from CrossFit Lutterworth, and my name is JD. I'm from CrossFit LE3. Just going to really quickly give you guys a brief background about us, because obviously some of you guys might not know who we are. I'm the head coach of CrossFit LE3, and my background has been heavily sport related initially. So I did a lot of kind of athletics, gymnastics when I was younger, and then went into kind of the martial arts domain and kind of crossed a lot of different martial arts from striking to grappling. And obviously with CrossFit, we try to vary what we do and we try to get people working at high intensity. So one of the greatest things about being a coach is seeing all the varieties of body types and different backgrounds and what people have done and what they haven't done and how that influences human performance, behavior, and how we move. So what we're going to talk about today is strength as a topic. And we're going to go through, like I say, some of the theoretical stuff. If you've got any questions, jot them down, because we're going to have a little section at the end where people, if they want to ask any questions, feel more than welcome to. Katie, do you want to introduce yourself and tell the people about yourself?
Sure. So I'm Katie, and I am owner and head coach at CrossFit Lutterworth. I played every team sport I could from the earliest age. Growing up in America, that's just pretty much what you do. So team sport was always a huge part of my relationship with fitness and just doing active things. And then moved to the UK about 19 years ago, and then kind of discovered CrossFit 2009. And I think what drew me to that more than anything else was almost that team sport spirit side of things, that community side of things, and then also just the badassery of what you get up to. And then for me, it became very much about becoming as strong as possible for me. I massively get off on strength stuff, being strong. Like feminist edge to that is being particularly strong for women. I don't mind when I outlift guys on things, but I won't rub it in too much either. So that's kind of it's a very empowering thing. I think then for me, empowering other people through CrossFit is a massive part of my motivation just as a coach, across the board. So my real passion is just personally now. I used to compete in CrossFit quite high level. I went to regionals in 2010, 2011. But now I really like the strong woman stuff. It's what I really enjoy doing. So I like to spend a lot of time thinking about lifting heavy things. And interestingly, probably the thing that I would be weakest at is the gymnastics side of things, and just controlling my own body weight. So I've got a mega deadlift, but ask me to do a pistol and I'd probably fall over. So it's ever increasingly important for me, not only as a coach, but just as a practitioner, to really embrace and understand why the body weight strength is so important as a foundation for anything else. Doesn't matter how much you can deadlift or back squat or bench. If you can't control your own body, then you're not setting yourself up for being as optimal as humanly possible. So I think that's, for me, a big part of why I really enjoy working on this stuff too.
Awesome. Lovely. And just to second that with Katie, it's I find that with training generally, and it doesn't really matter which sport you play or whatever you do. As a general rule, knowing yourself is probably the most important thing. And that's where we're going to start, because like Katie said, if you know what your strengths are, then that's good. And what we tend to do in sports is we tend to gravitate towards our strengths and we tend to use them. And then obviously performance-wise, what we can do is we can learn to try to optimize outcome through our strengths. But if you have done CrossFit, which a lot of you guys have, or done any training, you also know the importance of working on your weak areas. So understanding yourself first and foremost is the big thing. And like Katie said, like, I'm pretty good at handstands. My deadlift's pretty trash. I'm not a very good strong athlete, but I'm more powerful. So I can create power, but I'm not very strong. So it's knowing yourself, and that's how you develop. So what I'm going to do first of all, guys, I'm going to go through some general terms. I'm going to talk a little bit about the core. I'm going to talk about balance and stability. I did do a PowerPoint, but I've not managed to get it onto the computer. I'm having one of those days. So I'm going to do a really poor effort. I'm going to try and put my iPad up. And to be honest, as always, everything that you see is more about jogging my memory to remind me of certain things. So the first thing I'm going to show you, I don't know if you can see it there, is the body. And what we're drawing attention to here is the core. So a lot of the time people talk about core stability, and it's one of those terms that says, what are you doing? You're working on your abs, you're working on your core. You have to understand first and foremost that we are an animal, we're a human being, and we don't move around as much as a lot of other animals. Okay, so I normally say to most people, 0 to 35 years old, we've got a nice cushion of being able to do whatever we want, like run around, jump out of planes. And then suddenly, I found definitely when I got to about 35, suddenly injuries were plaguing me, and I was getting injured all the time, and I was struggling. So when I started to invest in spending time in understanding CrossFit and understanding lifting, what I found was actually a lot of my body alignment, a lot of my core strength wasn't there. People would say, oh, you're really strong. But what I noticed was when it came to lifting weights, picking up a barbell, actually, I wasn't that strong. So the diagram in front of you guys now is to basically illustrate the different parts of the body. And when we talk about the core, what we tend to think about, or what I tend to think about and teach people about, is everything from your shoulders down to your hips. Okay. So we walk around on two legs. And if you look at this diagram, it's actually quite classic that it shows obviously the abdominal muscles, it shows the lower back muscles, it shows the glutes, it shows the shoulders, but it doesn't really kind of focus around the pecs. And if we were looking at, say, an animal that's quadruped, so like a dog or a cat, we would be very much more focused on the chest and the shoulders. The reason why people sort of neglect the shoulders and the chest is because we walk on two legs. So we spend more time using, if you like, our lower limbs than we do our upper limbs, depending on, that's a generalization. But when we talk about core, the first thing to understand is that we should work really from the core outwards. So normally a lot of the reactions we have, if someone scares you, I just remember when I scared you, Anne, do you remember when I scared you at the box? Yeah. Okay, so what tends to happen is everything here braces and contracts, and then we kind of jump outwards, okay? And that is because we move better when everything closer to the body, so like our shoulders and our hips are switched on, we then are able to generate force and to move, whether it's running, whether it's swimming, climbing, pulling. What we need is those muscles to be able to contract and hold our shoulders stable. If you imagine someone on a skateboard and they've got a really dodgy hip, they're not going to be able to create any power like pulling, as they push with the skateboard, okay? Because if that hip was like not stable and not secure, the knee, doesn't matter how strong the knee is, the actual torque is coming from the hip. So when people talk about core stability or core strength, it's really important to understand that what happens here from the shoulders down to the hips is really important in generating force peripherally. And when I mean peripherally, I mean with the arms and with the legs. Okay, so again, when we're younger, we don't tend to think about that because it's something that, as when you're 0 to 20 years old, we have quite a nice balance and nice setup. But over time, we kind of develop habits, postures that tend to switch things off. And the classic posture is the stoop posture. So when most people think and associate getting old, they think of people who are losing the battle against gravity. So what happens is I'm being pulled here. Okay, so gravity every day is pulling me down and my shoulders tip forwards, my bum sticks out, my lower back rounds, and I'm in this position. Okay, so that's what would happen if we could create a gravity chamber. So we're going for like Dragon Ball Z fans here, but if we were to be able to increase gravity, it would pull us forwards and down. Okay, so this is why understanding that at a certain age, if we're not doing those strength exercises against gravity, things will be harder. There'll be more wear and tear on our elbows, on our wrists, on our knees, on our ankles, because that proximal or key point strength in the middle is the precursor to movement. So I'm not sure if that makes sense, but when people talk about core stability and going back to core stability, it's understanding that it's a balance, okay, more than anything. A lot of people go away and do like loads of sit-ups or loads of crunchies, and they might not think about the lower back. And likewise, people will find exercises in isolation, but our body is so complicated, it's important that we vary what we do, but keep consistent with those exercises throughout that. Okay, so the next thing to look at is postures. So I've got a little guy there with his postures. Okay, so first thing about posture is, some postures can come from stiffness. So like I say, if you're particularly old, or you've got a degenerative condition, or you just have a job that holds you in a sedentary position, you can get quite stiff and kyphotic. You can be lordotic, so you can be like basically Donald Duck with your bum sticking out. And these postural movements might be habitual, okay? What everyone should be able to do in theory is be able to create all these movements and positions with the way that we move, okay? So to a certain extent, when people talk about mobility, what we're doing is we're mobilizing, we're moving the joints and the body within the available range the body has. It's important to be able to do that. The reason it's important to be able to do that is because over time, we want more conscious control and more conscious awareness of our body. So when we lift things up, all the guys that lift weights, we know that we have to set the body in a position first before we lift. Okay, so if we're rounded in the lower back and our legs are straight when we're deadlifting, we know we're going to be using lower back to lift rather than our legs to lift. Okay, so I'll just quickly, I know it's a bit boring, but I'll just quickly demo that. So if my cushion was ultra heavy and I'm here and I go to do this here, my back's rounded, my legs are almost straight. So as I pull myself up, now I'm using my back to lift upwards. Okay, it's not a problem when it's a cushion because it's light. But if I was to do that 10,000 times, 20,000 times, it might start to create some wear and tear in my lower back. So setting myself into a good position first, so bum down, chest up, back straight, and then thinking about pushing through my legs is obviously using like a better route, the posterior chain. Now, that's going to become more important a bit later on when we start talking about like kind of our triad strength. So that the 3 exercises that I would give people generally to work on as a base for strength. But at the same time, what I want to note is that as human beings, we don't always set up that way. And specifically for the sports people, you can't grapple someone and say, hold on, let me just adjust my back position. Okay, you're going to be moving, rotating, and life is such actually that we have a variance of different movements. So the thing to remember is when you do train, when you're lifting weights, you want to lift sensibly, you want good setup, but we also do things like climbing ropes, pulling ropes, which require sort of different movements. And the more that we work on the stable foundations of movement, the better our movement is going to be generally when we add variance into that. Okay. So what was my next point? And my next point was going to be about stiffness and hypermobility. So when I set out in CrossFit, that's my little picture there, I was massively stiff in my lower back. Okay. So I couldn't, at the bottom of a deadlift, arch my back and keep my chest up. It just didn't happen. I didn't have the range of motion there. So I was stiff because I did a lot of boxing and everything was here. So I was quite happy to sit rounded. So at the bottom of a deadlift, I just physically couldn't do it. So what it meant for me was placing the barbell a lot higher up so I could get my back straighter. And I had to make those adaptations really early. And I had to put massive heel wedges on, not quite high heels, but like getting there just to be able to squat, because my squat was into my toes, my heels would come off the ground, otherwise I'd fall backwards. And this is why one of the reasons I love CrossFit so much is I've only met only one person that was a worse mover than me when I started, and I was horrendous. Like I couldn't, because I was such a specific athlete and because I'm so long-limbed, I had a lot of bad habits. But very quickly, over say 6 months, then to a year, I started to notice and feel the difference when I started to become more aware of my body when I was doing CrossFit type activities. And then that had a positive effect on my sport and my competition and everything else, so on and so forth. So understanding if you are why we do mobility is important, because what you want is you want to be able to access different planes of movement. You want to be able to access different ranges of movement, but some people are just stiff. Okay, so when you look at a spine bend and some of the people that I train, you can see where they're stiff, and I'm sure Katie's probably got the same. Some people that when they reach down for something, you can see the part of their spine that stays straight. Whereas what we want to try to do is we want to try and encourage through mobility, opening up different facets, moving in different ways. And then once we've got that, we just add attention to that and then also concentration, so that if you are in a bad position, you can let go of something, or you can get yourself into a better position before you move. So without trying to make it too complicated, everyone should be basically doing some sort of mobility and stretching. That's basically that at some point. what have I got next? Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about quickly is just a couple of different factors. Okay, so like I said before, your range of motion is important. So your ability to move your back in different ways and to understand that when you're doing different exercises. The control you have over your posture is also really important. And me and Katie's going to talk a bit about eccentric loading in a bit. But then also understanding balance is really important. So this is why when, as a CrossFit coach, we're always talking about good mechanics first, then consistency, and then intensity. And somewhere when we talk about consistency, what we expect is the same form of movement, or at least the control of the movement over repetitions, gives us a good indicator that you can then build up the intensity. So it's either the speed or the load that you're lifting. The foundations are always going to be the most important thing. So whatever we're talking about, the wider and the broader the foundations, the higher we can build. So sometimes it means coming back to those foundations. Again, I've never met anyone who deadlifted as badly form as I did when I first started. I couldn't pick the barbell from the floor, keeping my back straight. It just didn't happen. And then when we get into talking a bit more about strength, there are different types of strength. So we've got strength as in stability, so isometric strength, holding. We've got strength pushing something over time. So you could, like, I don't know, pushing a car, or, you know, pushing from a closed back position in a strict press. And then we start to then go towards things like power. So we've got strength, but using speed and velocity. And all those things are really important. But at the core and at the base, we need to understand how to set ourselves up in a good position and have the body awareness in order to move well. So my strength triad is, and everyone who's trained with me will know, the three sort of like exercises are your deadlift, your squat, and your press as a base. So if you are deadlifting, squatting, and pressing, you know, like every other week or every week or whatever it is, you are learning to be strong against gravity. So to me, it's the biggest buy-in for doing any strength program is the stronger you are against gravity, the easier everything is. Okay, unless you are a swimmer or you live on the moon or you live somewhere where gravity is different. Okay, because gravity is always going to be coming down on you. It's always going to be pulling down on you. And the performance points for your deadlift, your squat, and your press are all about posture and about keeping the shoulders, the hips, the knees, the toes in the right position in order to lift optimally. Now, the word optimum is probably one of the most important words, because a lot of the time with CrossFit or with people talk about maximizing all the time. I've got to maximize my lift, or I've got to maximize reps. But if you think about optimum, what it takes into account is your progress over time. So it might be that, yeah, you lift a little less as you're learning to deadlift, or you change what you're doing early in order to make it better. But we're always trying to strive to become better as we move towards, you know, the mastery of whatever skill it is that we're doing. So your deadlift, your squat, and your press, all the CrossFit guys will probably know most of the performance keys of performance for that. So as we've taken the long route round now to talk about bodyweight exercises, if we start talking about gymnastics, I find personally, I don't know if Katie's any different, that gymnastics is a fascinating one, because what we have is the control of our body weight, but there's a nice balance between effort and actually getting the correct form and movement. So some things like, you know, if you psych yourself up for a strong deadlift or a strong squat, not saying they're not skillful, but once you get the movement quite grooved, you can be ultra aggressive with it. Whereas with gymnastics, it tends to be more about switching on the correct muscles and thinking about the correct alignment, but at the same time, letting go of the additional tension that a lot of people hold. So you won't really see a good handstand if someone's got a lot of excess tension. And if you think about someone kipping on a bar, so swinging forwards and backwards, you'll see a lot of strong people really tensing the shoulders, and they're trying to create the kipping movement through strength, as opposed to allowing the movement to happen and relax and breathe. So when we talk about body weight movement, it's important to remember that there is a precursor to that, which is we're governed by gravity, which is why I don't think you can neglect strength at all. I'm just going to quickly say that I remember the first time I went to Power Base in Loughborough, what I noticed was all the GB guys, so anyone that was GB or English, you know, English standard at their sport, They could all squat, deadlift, and press. That was the impressive thing. You watched them, and they weren't CrossFitters. They were just like hockey players or rugby players or football players, whatever it was they played. The commonality they had was their lifting, and they were all impeccable with their form. And that's the first time that started making me think, like, actually, there's something that's important about strength and how to move. Now we'll get into it later, but I've talked way too much. Katie, do you want to jump in and say something that's going to save me, because I can't think of anything else to say at the moment?
You're on a roll, Jay. It's good. I mean, yeah, where I was going to go off the back of JD's is actually now starting to think a little bit more specifically about how do we start to find ways to tailor improving our own bodyweight movements, maybe more specifically in any of the bodyweight movements that you would want to start to learn how to master. And I'm thinking about things that come up in kind of a CrossFit day-to-day programming, like press-ups, pull-ups, pistols, handstand press-ups, and those sorts of things. But of course, not forgetting that a lot of the foundational strength building components of those things are going to be the bodyweight movements that we all take for granted and don't really think about it as being anything other than just an air squat or a lunge, or, you know, there's so many other variations of things that we do, that if we can't do those, then we can't do the more complicated stuff. So hold that thought while I fill up the sippy cup. Here, bud.
Multitasking.
So one of the things that JD said right at the beginning was that, you know, talking all about our core. And it reminded me, of course, that when you do your CrossFit level 1, and when you read up about CrossFit, is that it's a core to extremity program. So everything we do in a CrossFit programming kind of methodology perspective, everything we teach, everything we do, all the moves we do, start with your core and then radiate outwards. And if your core isn't, when we talk about core, it's not just your stomach, it's your back, it's your sides, it's everything that keeps us stable and upright and safe. Everything should start from there. And then everything that moves beyond that will be strong, stable, etc. What we need it to be in order to successfully work on those lifts or movements or whatever they are. So that's kind of the primary number one thing to remember when we're working on any of this stuff. If you're not focusing on getting that control and that tension in your core, whatever else is going on isn't going to be as good or successful or optimal as it could be or needs to be in order to work on our more advanced movements, well, any of our movements really safely. So let's just think about, and I think what we're going to plan on doing is actually now after this, do some practical workshops where we say, right, well, today we're going to work on, you know, half an hour on handstands, and JD can take that half an hour on press ups if you want to learn how to do press ups, RX press ups, and we'll actually do some practical stuff. But just to get a bit of an idea of how would you even begin to address building strength in these movements that you want to learn how to do. And, you know, number one, no matter what the movement is understanding what your current range of motion is in that movement. So if I take a pull-up as an example, if I jump up on the bar and I think, right, I'm going to do a pull-up and I can move that far, that's it, before I get stuck. Well, that's my current range of motion on my pull-up, and understanding where I can get to is step number one. If on my pistol squat, I can get to 2 inches above parallel before I collapse and fall or get really wobbly, then that's my current range of motion that I can move with integrity and control. And that'll always be what these bodyweight movements come back to, is being able to move with integrity, which means good, consistent movement, not deviating from our center without loads of wibbles, wobbles, or loads of help with holding on to something or having a massive heel wedge, which you can do to help assist you to learn how to get to that. But anyway, so integrity and control, not just falling and then hoping for the best, right? Actually controlling the whole range of movement. Once you know what your existing range of motion is, and that gives you an idea of what it is you actually need to work on. So it's the areas beyond that range of motion that you don't have the strength or control or ability to do. And that's what we need to focus on building. So say, for example, it's the bottom half of your pistol. You can't quite get to parallel, and that's where you just kind of plummet or drop. You can't get back out of the bottom or even all the way to the bottom. So what drills and what things can we do to then help to start build strength in the bit that you can't do yet? And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. I like to do eccentric work. So that the negative version of something. So a negative pull-up or an eccentric pull-up is I jump up and then I very slowly lower myself down, right? So that's the opposite of the pull-up. It's the lower down. That's the eccentric portion of the movement. With the pistol, instead of, it's not the pushing back up part, it's the going down part. With the press up, it's not the pressing away part, it's the lowering down part. So that's the eccentric. So working the eccentric and with control, and you can also add some tempo. So for press ups, I'm a pretty big stickler for trying to not let people do press ups on their knees, because it's really hard to get off your knees once you're on them. So we do negative press ups instead, where everyone's in that nice tight plank position. And the key to that is tight, everything in nice and close. And we focus on lowering down till the chest hits the floor. And then you can relax and just get back into that plank position any old how. And then we're going to get really tight again and focus on lowering ourselves under control. Now, the people who are doing those can't press up through that range of motion with that same amount of control, but they can lower themselves. And by doing that, they're going to help get to the point where they can press away in that range of motion a hell of a lot faster than if they just stay on their knees all the time. And the same can be said for any of these bodyweight movements, working that principle of I'm going to control my range of motion through the negative, which is easier to control, and then I'm going to build up the strength for the positive. And then we're also looking at things like accessory work. If I know in the pull-up that my tendency is for my elbows to flare out, that means that I probably have some issues with activating my big back muscles so that they can help pull me up. So then, as a coach, and this is where you need a little bit of help, I would say, right, well, I want you to do these banded lat pull downs so we get the big wing muscles to switch on, or I'm going to get you to do tempo negatives, or I'm going to get you to hold this top position because you just can't finish your pull-up. It's the top 2 inches that you can't quite get. You're always stuck right there underneath the bar. So how are we going to work that? I'm going to get you to hold it and slowly lower yourself and then pull back up just in that top inch or two. So then focusing on those areas that we know are a specific weakness, and we can pick lots of different exercises to do as accessory work to help then focus on those. A lot of people don't realize that they've got muscles that just don't switch on to do all the right work. And that's where having the basics. Hold on, I've got to fill up the sippy cup again.
That's all right. Katie, just to quickly add what you were saying, Katie, just to clarify, like a lot of people, we're still in a place where a lot of people will take, when they're trying to get good at something, they just practice that thing. I know it sounds weird, but like you said about press ups, Katie, people just, they can't do a press up, so they practice press ups, and they may only practice from their knees. But the problem with if you only practice from your knees, that's the only place you're going to get good at them. So there's a great quote, well, it's not necessarily a great quote, but there's a quote by Matthew Alexander that says, an exercise is only as beneficial in the posture in which you perform it. And if you think about something like hanging from the bar, so it's something that I do with a lot of people who want stronger, I would say stronger squeezes for jiu-jitsu or something like that, is varying how you hang with your hands. So you can have a grip like this, you can go supinated, you can go mixed grip, you can put your feet on the floor, and you can rotate round the shoulder in different degrees and different angles. And one of the great things about changing the specifics of a motion or an exercise is that, like Kate said before, a lot of muscles that switch on to supplement and facilitate that movement switch on. Whereas in the dominant skill you're trying to learn, maybe those muscles aren't switching on, which is where variance comes. Like if you are doing, I don't know, a pull-up, it's like there's lots of different other things that you could do that could supplement your pull-ups and make your pull-ups better. That's when your coach helps, because like Kate said, if they see the elbows flaring outwards, maybe they're thinking you're weak in the lats. So it's like, okay, get on a rowing machine, clamp your lats down, drive through the legs. And there's lots of different things that you can do that will then be precursors to movement. And one of my favorite things to say always is your potential as a physical being is like a river. And what happens is the more exercises you do well, it opens up these tributaries that run into that river. So it's like, you might think, okay, sit-ups, I know how to do a sit-up. It's like, yeah, you might be, but you might not be doing a sit-up very well. It might be a jerky movement. And like Katie said about the movement integrity, understanding that every skill or every exercise you do, there is like a level of competence to that. And, you know, when people say to me, oh, I've mastered double unders, I'm like, oh, how many can you do in a row? And they're like 5. And I'm like, probably not mastered them. But, you know, like wait until you can do 500 unbroken. And then you're sort of like querying whether you've mastered them or not. But it's a big thing to understand that one movement can be broken apart into lots of different fragments, that if you practice those accessory exercises, you know, you do the movement. And Katie, you probably see it a lot. People go, oh, I got my first toes to bar that day. And I'm like, you probably didn't. You probably have got it over the last month by doing different things. And then that day it all came together because of the practice you did before.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I think it's really easy to get caught up in, right, I want to get better at pull-ups. So to do that, I just need to do pull-ups. And that's just not going to be enough, really. I mean, it depends how long you're willing to hang in there and wait. You know, the beauty of CrossFit is if you just hang in there and keep doing what you're doing and keep, you know, make sure that you're always pushing yourself for the hardest variation of the movement that you can do to meet the stimulus of the workout and blah, 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 then over time you will be able to do all these things. But as a human race, we're typically not that patient. So if you really want to say, right, okay, my goal this year by my birthday, or well, by the time I turn 40, or by the end of this year, I want to have strict pull-ups. You're probably going to need to do more than just work on your pull-ups in the way that you normally work on them. You know, if you're in a CrossFit class and you're doing banded pull-ups in your workouts and you're always using the same band, you're never going to get any stronger, really, in those pull-ups. We've got to push the envelope a little. We've got to mix it up. CrossFit's cool because the whole point is constantly varied functional fitness. So it kind of makes sense that if I do the same scale for something all the time, I'm going to stagnate, which is why we offer multiple scaling options for these movements to mix and match. And then we have different bands of different sizes. So when one gets too easy, well, now I'm going to make it harder for you. And yeah, you might be slower, but that's okay, because otherwise you'll never get better. And it's understanding that in a workout context, in order to help work towards your strength goal, you might be sacrificing your speed in a WOD, but so what? You want to get better at it, that's the side, that's the handoff. Some people aren't willing to do that, so they're probably not going to progress. The beauty of this kind of stuff is if you really wanted to, you know, and I can use Alice, so Steph's friend Alice from my gym. Her goal was to get strict pull-ups. I think that's most of our girls' goals, be able to do a pull-up, bastard things. And she was really, really actually dedicated and keen to do it. So I said, okay, well, I've got these 2 10 to 20 minute extra sessions for you to do a week. That's it. So she came and did open gym, 10 to 15 minutes, twice a week. And it was less than 6 weeks, she went from literally maybe 2 inches of movement to pull up. Right. And, you know, she's just an average, awesome lady who worked hard and did what she was told. But a lot of the accessory movements and drills, it wasn't just pull-ups. It wasn't just doing banded pull-ups all the time or as many as she could. And it worked. And it worked in a pretty short amount of time. But she stuck with it. And that was the consistency is the key there. But at the same time, as I said before, you can just carry on. And over time, you'll get there if you do your day-to-day stuff with your coaches, you know, like they tell you to. What was the other thing I was going to say in terms of it? Oh yeah, so that's accessory work. You know, it's not just about doing the pull-ups themselves. It's about other bits and pieces that help to feed into that strength and stability of the pull-ups. I'll tell you what, I could multitask and do anything.
You did a great job, Kate.
Stop distracting me.
Yeah, it's a lot of good.
He's cute though. So yeah, accessory work. And again, people poo accessory work. It's so important. I think as I've gotten older, I've realized that all of my niggles that I had developed, you know, the famous CrossFit shoulder, that's not a thing unless you let it be a thing. And you only let that become a thing if you're one of those stubborn jackasses who starts doing CrossFit and thinks, I don't need to do that accessory bullshit. Actually, you really do, because it helps keep you as a whole, safe, moving person, no matter what age you are when you start doing this stuff, the accessory work is what helps keep us together, because it makes sure that the back half is working as hard as the front half and things aren't being pulled in the wrong place because part of you is more dominant than the other. You can have another snack. Really? That's 4 snacks now he's had since we started this call. He had lunch too. And that's really important, but that comes down to control. If you can control your body in all ranges of motions, then we know that we've got that base for strength building and progressions. Funny enough, one of my top movements to recommend for any, oh, you want to sit there, any of our body weight strength movements that will help you to be better at them all is the Turkish get up. The Turkish get up is, again, highly underrated, but probably one of the best because it forces us to work on our mobility, which JD was saying is so important. If we don't have the ankle flexion to be able to get into the bottom of the squat without assistance, we're going to always struggle somewhere, somehow with that issue. It's going to be a knock-on effect. If you don't have the range of motion in your knees and your hips to move through our squat patterns, our deadlift hinge, or our pistols, or our lunge, right? Those are all squats, hinging or squatting. Then we're going to have a problem. If you can't move your shoulder freely in the socket to can have that weight overhead and actually go through those motions, you're going to have problems. So the Turkish get up just embodies for me every element of movement that we need to be competent at in order to be good movers. What are you doing? You're helping me. That's not helping. So if you wanted something you could do just on the side and know that no matter what, it's going to help and benefit you, it's the Turkish get up. That's kind of like my umbrella thing that will absolutely help.
Yeah, massively. I mean, I did a YouTube video, Katie, with the intention of it to be like a 2-minute video on Turkish get up. It ended up being like 16 minutes, might even be longer. And for that reason, because the thing about the Turkish get up, I mean, I'm pretty sure everyone knows what a Turkish get up is here. But it's one of those things, again, that you can do, and you can do it really, really well, really competent, and you can just do it as in get up from the floor and not really care. And the more competent you are about getting up and doing it right, the better control you've got, proprioception of your shoulder. It's great for rehab of the shoulder or prehab of the shoulder, body awareness, control. And I think it's like what's the best way to think of it? It's one of those skills that once you recognize it as a skill, your body takes the movement pattern it does, it remembers it. So it's like, I haven't done a Turkish get up for maybe, I would say at least 2 weeks, but I can guarantee with a warm up, I could probably do like it comfortably with like a 24 kilogram kettlebell with the kettlebell up, because I spent so long trying to get good at it. So like skipping. So if you're good at skipping, it's like I can skip easily because I spent so long skipping. Whereas if you're not so good at skipping, it takes a lot more energy. But like Kate said, the Turkish get up in terms of your body awareness, your control, is a fantastic exercise to do. So it's finding those little exercises. And again, you can break the Turkish get up down into sections, because really it is a hybrid, comprehensive movement pattern, rather than just an exercise, which is why I don't tend to put them in, Katie, in like in an AMRAP or anything.
No, I never program them. So I'm a huge, with any of this stuff, and I always say to everybody, this is to be done with control and thoughtfulness in your movement, not for speed. You can't rush. If you rush a Turkish get up, you're going to be missing out on a key part of the positioning, the movement, and you're missing the mark completely. And I think they can become dangerous because you're inevitably going to not be focusing on keeping tension in the right places at the right time. And you'll just be putting yourself in harm's way. But I mean, I could say that about any movement in a workout where there's load involved. Yeah. But some are obviously kind of safer than others within reason at a particular loading percentage. But yeah, Turkish get-ups, you must do with intention rather than just mindlessly for time. 100%.
Just over quickly to the guys a second. So in terms of mobility and range of movement, all the jiu-jitsu guys will probably be familiar, like if you were spinning for an arm bar or if you were doing a triangle, sometimes depending on your training partner, there's 2 factors. I remember not being able to turn and twist round and do an arm bar from from side control on top. I couldn't get my foot into the right position, and that was because my ankles were too tight. So that was a mobility issue. But in my mind, I thought I just can't do a spinning armbar from top. I just couldn't do it. And then you're also probably all aware of having a good drilling partner, someone who kind of is realistic enough that they're being real, to compared to someone who is either too stiff and just like doesn't give you anything, or someone who just kind of flops over. So when it's bearing that in mind when you're doing your drills and your repetition, you need to almost get the right drilling partner so they understand and recognize how to be. And then if you are struggling with a certain movement, like a spinning armbar, a lot of the time it's about body awareness. So it's like we get object fixation a lot of the time. So for example, the classic, would be on a kettlebell swing, we focus on where the kettlebell goes, whereas like we shouldn't even be caring about the kettlebells attached to us. So we move, our body moves, and then the kettlebell moves as a process of that. So the kettlebell doesn't move us, we move the kettlebell. And it's the same thing with like your wrestling and your grappling. It's like you've got to be aware of your body position and where your focus needs to be. And for a long time with me in arm bars, I was always focused on the person's arm that was grabbing, not on where my hips were and my legs were in terms of trapping their arm using my legs. So this is where kind of having a good coach to kind of watch what you're doing and pick apart what you're doing and go, I want the focus to be more on your hips, for example, in comparison to what you think you should do. I think our eyes sometimes are like our worst sense, because when we look at things, we assume we know how to move, but skill is trickery sometimes, because when someone's skillful at something, they make something look easy. If they make it look easy, we assume that we can do it with the same amount of ease, and then it just ends up a nightmare. So it's always worth asking the coaches, like, where should my focus be in this movement? So we know with squats that we're driving through the heels, keeping the chest up, knees apart, all that stuff. And as the movements get more complicated, or even if they're just different, it's picking the coach's brain and saying, okay, watch me swing on the rig, or watch me do whatever it is, lift the weight, do the snatch, whatever it is. Like, where do I need to be focusing? And you learn that through experience and insight yourself. Part of the thing that we've done a lot, Katie, at LE3, when it comes to things like your vanilla strength, your deadlift, your squat, and your press, is obviously not everyone at home's got a barbell. So using a kettlebell or a dumbbell and being just as diligent how you move is massively important. And I think it's something that people forget. So even if, like I said, the only thing I had to deadlift was a pillow, if I practice deadlifting, I'm still going to get a strength gain. It's not going to necessarily be a strength gain in terms of a 1 rep max, but what it will mean is that my body recruits and my movement patterns are better for that position in the way I'm moving. And that is remembered. So when we start to cycle the movement and we do lots and lots of reps, there's going to be a positive impact to that. So if you only had a pillow at home and you worked deadlifts, you did like, say, a certain amount of deadlifts per day with a pillow, and you did squats with a pillow and did press with a pillow, my hypothesis would be, in terms of like running, walking, stepping, you're still going to get some gains because you're still thinking about being active against gravity. And that does have an effect over time, both consciously and subconsciously. Because the ideal is you're at work, something drops on the floor, it's like you want to pick it up. When something drops on the floor, you want to try and, like, I know everyone tends to do that, but if you start to think about like bending your legs to get down to the ground and moving well, that's kind of like my and Katie's job done. It's like, the practice you do with us, we want you to be able to take that outside and do it at home, do it at work, and to move better. And just to sort of touch on what Katie was saying about the eccentric phases, dropping a barbell does feel great. Okay, it is one of those things, you've snatched heavy, it's overhead, ditching it feels great. But when we start to cycle movements, controlling the barbell down and lowering it down with control is just as important. And I'll never forget, I don't know if Katie ever met Sam Grudgings. He was one of my coaches, he's little Sam, yeah. He never, would drop a weight from overhead. He'd always bring it back down on his shoulders. And he's one of the best lifters I know for his body weight ratio to weight. And I used to say to him, Sam, why don't you drop the weight? It's a lot of weight. He's like 110 kilos overhead for a small little 65K guy. And he'd just say to me like, oh, it's just extra training.
Yeah.
And I was to think like, I don't know anyone who could control the barbell as well as him back onto the shoulders again. And it's like, it makes sense. Like, so again, we're now mixing the neurological kind of benefits of setting a position and moving with the habitual patterns of everyday life. So your eccentric loading and all that stuff is so important. It's one of those things.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, in lifting with weights, I think it's key to safety. Being able to control the weight down is almost more important than controlling it on the way up. In terms of safety, for sure. But it helps, and it is. I mean, if you look at like powerlifting, if you drop the bar from the top, it's a no rep. You have to lower it under control, and there's a reason for that. You need to be able to show that you've got the strength to control the bar through the entire lift, which is up and then back down again to your starting position. So it's definitely important. It's that marriage between, and I think JD was talking about earlier, it's that marriage between tension and relaxation in all the gymnastics stuff. It's knowing and understanding when to recruit that power, that energy, that tension, and then knowing when actually you need to relax and let gravity and your body do its thing. So you're not fighting against something, and that's where you need the mobility to do that. But yeah, that concept of control is so important. And if you can't control your movement, then you're not ready to do it, as a rule of thumb. But that's not a bad thing at all. And there's no taboo. Again, we were talking earlier right at the beginning, like concept of progression, and then on the opposite of that, regression, right? So with every movement in CrossFit, we can make it harder, or we can make it more accessible. And I always hesitate to use the term easier because I don't want to stigmatize it. It's making it accessible, right? So not everybody can come in to the CrossFit gym and do full RX press ups with integrity and control. So if I say that, well, we'll make them easier for you, right? Well, straight away, you're not even going to be remotely interested in doing that because you're going to feel patronized. But if I say, well, we're going to make that movement accessible for you in this workout, but understand that by doing it this way, you're actually still building strength so that at some point you will be able to do it that way, which is, for whatever reason, the golden standard that we have to compare movement to. So, just changing your mindset a little bit as well when you're tackling stuff just in the gym on a day-to-day, I think can help you be more keen to regularly tackle building up that body weight strength. Don't stigmatize changing how you're doing something in a workout to be any kind of a negative. Think of it as, but I'm making this drill accessible so that I can become stronger in this movement and actually do it well. Because what we don't want is you doing your press ups like this, just so that you can do them, right? We're going to fight through that and we're going to be all over the place. Well, no, there's no integrity to that movement. I'm compromising my body and my muscles by doing it in the most, hideous, ugly way just to do it. And that's not smart. And what we want to do is create a bunch of really smart training people who understand where we're trying to get and how we're trying to do it, and being cool with that, because that's absolutely the best way. Does that make sense? That was a bit sorry about that.
I think it's the whole idea of, like I say, when people first go to try and do something, like whether it's a pull-up, whether it's a muscle-up, whether it's like a pistol, the chase to get that goal is like, such a pull that people's motivation isn't for more. They're just like, I just need to get up. It's like that. And there are emergencies. There are times, I call them emergencies, where we need to just get something done. And it's like, okay, I get that. But if we're trying to play the long game, which we should be, and we're trying to understand our body, the buy-in is the more intelligence we approach learning with, the quicker we learn everything. So I often think, like, if someone's really, really good at something and they've got it, they should be able to learn something on a completely different tangent really fast. So if someone's like really good at jiu-jitsu, you should be able to learn the guitar as well, like quickly, or the piano, or whatever else it is. Because if you don't understand the principles of how you've learned something, then what you've learned is a method. Whereas what you want ideally is to understand the principles of what you've learned so well that if something else comes along, it could be something mental, it could be playing a game of chess, it could be, I don't know, surfing, it could be something completely different. You should be able to apply the athletic intelligence that you've achieved from learning of the goals. And that's the whole Mr. Miyagi thing. It's like, he didn't want to teach him something, a block, because he knows that if the intention and motivation of a block's there, you start doing it differently. So he's like, I'm going to teach you to wash cars and do it in a certain way. And then that becomes something different. And like the amount of times I've done that with other people, I've said, right, practice this, practice these ring rows. And they're like, oh, like I want to do pull-ups. I'm like, do ring rows. I'm like, ring rows are harder. It's like if you give me 100 kipping pull-ups and 100 ring rows from a horizontal plane, like ring rows are way harder. But people often, exactly like you said, Katie, the mistake people make is they see movement as a superior and inferior movement.
Yeah.
And a sit-up is a sit-up. It's not inferior or superior to a toaster bar. It's like if we had a skill analysis and it's like you can do 50 movements at a really high standard, my guess would be over time, and if you correlated it, your movement proficiency would be better. Whereas if you're only good at like 5 movements and then 45 movements, you wing your way through, you're not taking hold of the opportunity you have, which is to learn well and to understand your body. So I think that's something that people get over time. It's like, people will chase weight or they'll chase a skill in order to be able to do it, which is fine because I get that completely. But understanding how you learning how you learn, that metacognition is so important because that's what gives you like kind of the ability to do something a lot quicker. And most of the athletes that learn quickly have that understanding about themselves. So what I was going to do now, guys, is open up the floor to questions. Has anyone got an immediate question they want to ask? Everyone's like, no.
Oh, okay, good.
None at all. Come on.
I think hopefully off the back of this, when we go to do more of the practical on specific movements, that when we're talking about certain movements or accessory work or why we want you to do certain things, hopefully now it'll make a lot more sense as to why those are the things that we say, right, well, let's do this now. And hopefully that'll create a little bit more buy-in and understanding of what it is that you need to do specifically to work on those things. Sorry, Vicky, was that a hand up?
I don't know. It sounds better in my head, so bear with. Like obviously, like so when we train together, for instance, like Sam's squats are a lot quicker and a lot more efficient and easier. They look easier, and then I really struggle. And I don't know whether it's again I'm really long limbed, so again along JD's style. Sam, bless him, is a little bit shorter. So does that play a difference in the mechanics of strength? So then you're looking at not just the move, you're now looking at that person. So then does that person have an individual training program, or is it going to be like the same cues for us both to achieve the same outcome?
So I would say like initially, like it's a really good question. And the thing, I'm pretty thick, right? I'm a thick person. And before I started CrossFit, right, when I was doing martial arts, I could never understand why people were faster than me. So say like someone like Zeb, me and Zeb were doing press-ups together. And like some of my training partners would just cane. And I'll be thinking, I'm really fit. Why can't I do more press-ups? I never turned around and thought my arm span is like 7 times the distance to theirs, right? Because I would just directly compare myself to people. So I'd be like, if they can do more press-ups in a minute, they're better than me. That's how I used to think. Like, and it wasn't until I started CrossFit that I started to realize a couple of things, which is number one, my mechanics were really poor when it came to the lifts. Okay. And then as time's gone on, what I've noticed is mechanics play a massive part, but then there's even more layers to that. So I would turn around and go, well, being a long 6'5" guy, I'm never going to be good at Olympic lifting. And then you get someone like AJ Bartow, who's like 6'8" and good at Olympic lifting. And then you're like, oh, okay. Or like Matt Mortel or Big Rich, we've got our gym. And the interesting thing is you can get 2 people with long levers who have a completely different muscular setup. So they can look the same, but if one of them's fast twitch fibers, like I'm a power athlete, everything to me is like just throw things hard and fast. That's it. That's me, basically, power-wise. If you get me to lift load over time, drop down, and then back up again into a squat, I'm done. It's like literally like 3 squats at bodyweight, and that's me for like 6 months. I need to be in a wheelchair and everything. But like, it does play a part, Vicky. And I think what it is it's learning what it is about the movement that you struggle with personally. because, you know, sometimes it's a bit of mobility, so you need to warm up a bit more, and it's understanding, like, you know, we all know people that like dip just inside the squat and back out again, and it's not that that's wrong, that's just what they do. And if they're doing CrossFit specifically, that's going to be advantageous to drop into the bottom, unless there's so many reps that you're bouncing out the bottom, as you know, especially if you're lifting low. So I guess like the answer for me would be, yeah, there are differences in mechanics, there's difference in muscular setup, there's difference in all those things. And it took me a while to let go of looking around at other people and going, well, I should be matching them or competing with them. And what I learned to do was, on this workout, I know my setup. I know most of the guys at the box set up as well. So I'm going to choose that person to pull me along and to kind of keep along with them, because that's right for me. Because there's always, again, it's that word optimum. There's an optimum speed to move to make sure you're getting a good workout. You're getting gains, as in, you know, physical gains, and you're also making sure you're taking care of yourself as well. You know, like I said, if it's a 1 rep max and it's a competition, okay, like there might be some like ugly, hopefully there's not, but there might be some ugly finishes to a lift, but that's a very different scenario to training. So I would say, yeah, the people you train with, your training partners, you're not all aiming for the same thing. Or sorry, that's not the right way to look at it. You are aiming for the same thing, but your objectives might be different. So my objective in a squat might be, I'm trying to sit at the bottom of the squat a bit more, keep my chest up more because my lower back's a bit weaker. So I know that. Whereas maybe for Sam's rapid, he is fast mover. He jumps under the bar nicely with Olympic lifting as well. And if those people are different, then it's like the natural inquiry for you, Vicky, is understanding it more, but then come to the coaches and ask them what point should be considering and looking at. I bet, Katie, you see that a lot with your guys as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's universal standards in terms of what we would want someone to ultimately be able to do, but the way you do that will look different depending on your mechanics and a load of other factors. So, you know, we know ultimately that as long as you are healthy and there's no injury or anything else preconditioned to stop you from doing it, that in an ideal world, we want everyone to be able to reach a squat that breaks parallel and to be able to stand tall at the top, right? So those are our 2 points of reference for a squat. But how you get there versus how Sam gets there will look different because you guys have different mechanics. And that's fine. Your squat is good. Both of you are still good at that squat. So yeah, you know, the cueing or what you might need to focus on or think about, your journey from point A to point B will be different from Sam's. And that's really normal, really standard. I mean, people with long femurs, you know, you look at them and you think, oh, it just looks like they're folding in half instead of squatting down. And part of that's because it's hard when your top half of your leg is significantly longer than the bottom half of your leg.
It's horrible.
You get your ass below your knees without looking like you're folding in half. But you know, that's only relevant to you if you've got long femurs. If you've got crap ankle mobility, you're going to be trying to fold over because you can't squat any deeper. And it might look like it's the same problem, but actually it's a different problem. It's just manifesting itself in a similar way. So yeah, I mean, that's all part of the fun from the coaching perspective.
I think what in a weird way, what you want to strive for, Vicky, I think when you move through movements is like I heard it described best as like a quietness. So it's like when you see an athlete move really well, there's like a quietness about it. It's like there's no kind of jerkiness. There's an integrity to the movement. And when you go and watch like the region athletes move, like it's great lifting heavy weights, but even then doing simple things like burpees and squats and box jumps, it's unbelievable. And you'll know those people that can jump onto a box and it's like, it just looks like there's no effort. They just kind of float up there. And it's that proficiency and that skill that you want to get. And it's that balance. It's that balance of kind of going, what is the optimum I need to move?
Yeah.
How can I make it relaxed? How can I make it efficient? And strive for that rather than more reps. Does that make sense? Like, you know,
yeah. Well, and that's the concept of virtuosity, which is also a huge pillar of what CrossFit is based on. And that's the concept of doing the common uncommonly well.
Yeah.
Right. So to be having virtuosity in a movement, meaning that the most straightforward, simple movements you do with poetic precision. And that's kind of the aim. But it's not about the bar muscle ups. It's about watching athletes. So if we're looking at the games athletes, watching them move is beautiful because they have such, I mean, a couple of them still move terribly, but anyway, you know, because they've got that virtuosity, that those basics nailed. It's just beautiful to watch. It's smooth. Every part of it is harmonious. And that's kind of like, I would always say that's the aim. But if you know, I would rather be able to squat with virtuosity like a games athlete than do bar muscle ups any day of the week.
Yeah.
But then I've been in the game so long, I'm not that bothered about the flashy stuff anymore.
Yeah. But it's a good question, Vicky.
Yeah, really good.
Sam, you got
So when I joined CrossFit, I hadn't really done any sort of core exercises or anything at all, and I still feel like that's probably my weakest like area, because I feel like when the core isn't tight, I'm rocking about in positions, and I don't feel as strong in certain techniques and stuff. I'm just wondering, like, if I could be pointed in a direction of like core workouts or.
Yeah, so I mean, we've done a couple of core workouts on the weekend, Sam. I know what you mean. I think with you, Sam, it's not a case of it won't be a case of you not being strong in your core, because I think a lot of the stuff you do with your Olympic lifting shows you are, but I think it'll be your body awareness. So it's like, are you aware of your shoulders and your chest position in relation to your hips? Like, so right. It sounds really simple, but it's not simple, because like, I remember like trying to teach someone I won't even say who it is. I remember teaching someone to deadlift, right? I'm not lying. This is what happened. I said to him, "You're rounding your back." And he was like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "When you're deadlifting, you're kind of like, you're rounding your back like this. And I want you to do this." So he was like, "Okay." So I was like, "So arch your back." And he was like this. And I said, "No, arch it." And he was like, "I am." And I literally videoed him, showed him, and he was like, "Oh my God." Like, and he couldn't believe like what he was doing. So it was like, this poor gent, I think he had like some problems, like, you know, he wasn't aware of his body. Now with you, it's not that severe at all, Sam, but what it is in certain positions, for example, if you proud chest it, you might hyperextend. So right. You're putting your chest up, which means that your abs aren't switching on. And you mistake that chest up prompt as solid. Chest up, your lower back takes the hit, and really like chest up, stomach in's better, so you're stacked. So there's quite a few things that you can do, like kind of that we go through in the core class. So we do like things like hollow rocks. And before being able, hollow rock's a great example. Before being able to do a hollow rock, a correct hollow rock, there's a precursor of exercise you do beforehand. Whereas if you just try and hold the position and you're not holding it well, you're just kind of putting a dent in your progress. So there's quite a few things that we can do, Sam, and especially from what me and Katie are talking about moving forward, doing the practical sessions, we can definitely put something together, because, I mean, we did a session yesterday, Anne, didn't we? And David wasn't there. Oh, Zoeb and Chi did it as well. But getting that hollow rock position, understanding it, you're right, mate. No, he's joking. Yeah, is important. So for you, Sam, it's more like knowing what your focus point is, like I say, where your chest, your shoulders are on some of the movements, because I know how it feels to be flailing around on the rig, not sure or aware of where you are and how you do things. So
yeah, I find especially with like the snatch, that tends to be like the one where I'm not because I do feel like my chest is more, I arch my back.
Yeah.
Like,
it sounds quite hypermobile, so like
yeah.
elbows are way beyond like my snatch rigidity comes from the end of motion, while Sam just keeps bending. Yeah. And it's that awareness of knowing an end of range, but also a safe end of range, isn't it? Like,
yeah, definitely.
Abilities. I don't know if that plays a part as well.
Yeah, probably.
I actually find hypermobility can be one of the more challenging issues than just poor mobility to get people to understand and deal with, because then you have to actively understand where that safe end range is. But then you need to learn how to control it, because hypermobility, basically, you know, you could just bend yourself in half, and you could do that with no weight and probably be just fine. But the minute we load you, your body just goes, "Excuse me." and just collapses, doesn't know how to control that, because some of, those of us who are immobile, we get stopped naturally by the fact that our body's like, nope, too tight, can't go anymore. And then that's also not a good way to move through a loaded movement, but it gives the illusion of control and stabilization, though, to the detriment of your shoulder. But if you don't have that, you've literally got nothing to stop that bar from moving around. So you'll overcompensate. And yeah, learning how to control that when you're hypermobile is really hard work.
Yeah. No, that's
If I'm understanding you correctly, JD, are you saying that any exercise pretty much can be a core exercise if you bring your attention to your core?
Yes, that's what I would say, 100%.
Yeah, unless you're playing the keyboard on the floor, you're lying flat and you're like, just your hands like that, like, yeah.
You can still squeeze your butt when you're doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's like, it is. It's how often do we sit at a desk working and we switch off? Okay, so like our core isn't switched on. And then that's the same reason why, like what should happen, I say it all the time, I use like catching a ball as an example. If someone throws something heavy and you're standing up or sitting down, like you don't know what that ball is. Let's say it's a kettlebell and someone throws something hard and you catch it. Like your body's getting information as you kind of catch it, and it's like, hey, it's too hard to slow down. It's still moving, and there should be a certain point where you go, this is going to rip my shoulder out, so you let it go, and that's a reactional thing, like a deadlift. If you go to lift a deadlift and then your back is in danger of blowing out, your hands should give out before your back goes. Like that should be a safety mechanism. But because we spend time in broken postures, that communication network isn't always great. So then you go to lift something, your back's in a bad position, and suddenly the strain on your back or your shoulder or whatever it is goes, and then we injure ourselves. So it's like when we're sitting and like the Japanese are great for it. They always talk about, they sit, they drink tea, like they're drinking tea, but they're doing more than that. They're thinking about their core activity. They're thinking about their awareness of their body. They're doing like 1,000,001 different things. And then it becomes this really weird paradox that you learn something over and over and over and over again until you can forget about it, because then your core's active. So it's like, that's really kind of how the practices that we do, it's not even about the thing, it's about how we behave, how we are. And yourself, David, if you're stressed at work and like you retain a lot of stress in your neck and your shoulders, you can have been in the same position at work, but just the mere stress has activated your limbic system, and that's made everything more tight. So it's like, we've got to be aware a lot of the time that whatever it is that we're doing, we can let go of that stress, and we can let go of the tension, but we can still be connected in the body. So whether you sit, stand, whatever you're trying to do, everything's technically a workout or a practice. The more mindful we are of what we do, and like I say it all the time, and people get bored of me, and I never get bored of myself. When I went to my Buddhist retreat, we would do meditative walking for 20 minutes. And I shit you not, this was the speed we'd walk at. You'd literally stand up. And I thought they were joking the first time we started. We were walking like this. Now imagine you're walking that speed for 20 minutes, right? And you've got a room full of people. It's not weird because everyone's doing it, right? And within 3 days, my hip that clicks stopped clicking. And then you start to think to yourself, well, actually, there's more to whatever practice it is you're doing. Whatever grabs your attention, whether it's jiu-jitsu, boxing, CrossFit, lifting weights, doing pull-ups, that's the thing that gets you interested. But the practice becomes how you articulate it, how you express it, how you become aware. And then, you're washing the dishes, and you're washing the dishes with a good posture, and you're relaxed and you're breathing. And it's like, I'll never forget the time that I left the blind open by accident, and I was like this, watching the dishes. My face was like this, and my shoulders were like that. And I was like, why am I so stressed about washing the dishes? And now it's like, now washing the dishes has become a thing, like it's therapeutic to me. It's like tidying the kitchen has become therapeutic. So training should be the same sort of thing. We are training and we're learning a skill, but we're learning to breathe. We're learning to move in a good way. And that should give us energy. And that's kind of what we want to do. So I think I've probably gone off on a massive tangent there, but
I was going to ask, and I think you're probably getting into it now, so don't repeat yourself if you don't want to. But it's really interesting. You've covered loads and loads of ground, but what are like the 2 or 3 big takeaways that you want us to take from this session this afternoon? Going back to your learn the principles then.
So what I would say is open your mind and understand that you don't know what you don't know. So like the first thing, like I said about Katie, is like, okay, Katie's never done any kind of grapple, as far as I'm aware. She's probably a black belt now, but she's never done any grappling arts. But when I've grabbed her and like pretended to throw her, and then she sunk her weight down, and my spider sense has gone off, and I've just thought she's about to slam me on the head, there's something intrinsic about what she's learned and her strength that expands beyond like her practices. So if you go in saying, I know how to air squat, I know how to do press ups, and your mind wanders when you're exercising, it's not that it's bad, but it's saying like, can I be better at something I think I know how to do? And what are my key points? Where is my concentration? Where are my thoughts? What am I doing? And then can I recognize that the things that I do outside of the sport or the exercises that I do need attention? And then everything that I do in a whole, so like let's say like press ups, like Katie was saying, pull ups, there are accessory exercises around that actually will help me build towards that. But it's also about the mind as well. So I guess like open your mind to understanding that it's okay not to understand, and try and feel and try and understand what the coach is trying to tell you. Because a lot of people I find, once they get like a little bit good at something, they run away. They're like, yeah, I know how to do it now. And then all you've got to do is load that movement, put a bit more weight on the bar, and then what you'll see is the depth at which they understand that. And I've done it myself. It's like I can snatch 40 kilos. Yeah, that's good. I can snatch 50. And then when it gets to 70, it looks completely different. And that's the depth at which I understand that. So I don't think I've answered your question at all there, David. I think I've just talked absolute crap. So sorry. Katie, you help out here. You help rescue it, Katie. Rescue it.
I think mindful movement, focusing on your core as the starting point for anything you do, no matter how basic or mundane you think the movement is, because that will help you to build what you need baseline wise for all of these bodyweight movements or any of these movements that you would like to be more proficient at. Understanding where you are with your movements that you want to improve on. And don't be resistant when the coaches ask you to do a particular thing, because we're not doing it because we want to give you the easier option. We're doing it because we don't want you to reinforce bad movement patterns. So like in a workout, right? So those 3 things, but then tied to that third thing is if you want to work on becoming better at those movements, it's identifying where your weak points are and then working that in either kind of an eccentric way or whatever else, but in a way that's controlled and conscientious, and being patient and allowing that progress to work. But it always comes back to mindful movement. Everything we do needs to have that intention behind it, because that's what helps us to create that concept of virtuosity, which will translate from the air squat to a weighted squat, to an overhead squat, to our snatch, to our bar muscle ups. It's all linked intricately, but that's that starting point.
See, that was way better. What Katie said.
I mean, you warmed me up.
Yeah, something like that. But no, yeah. And I think,
can I ask a question, please?
Oh, yeah, go for it, Zoya. Go.
How would you, this sort of concepts we've been talking about, how does that translate into martial arts?
So, when we talk about, say, like a rear naked choke.
Ooh, I really want to do this now. What is this? Rear naked choke?
No, I'm not teaching you anything. Your rear naked choke, Zoya. I know, don't get me wrong, Liam will break it down and he'll say stuff like push your chest in, open up your chest, get that squeeze and stuff like that. So what we know, there's going to be direct parallels and crossover from your ability to pull into your squeeze. So I know that my Darce choke, some of it is my levers, as in my arm length or whatever, But a lot of it is because I do a lot of ring rows, a lot of pull-ups. That's why I've got a strong squeeze. Okay. So the other thing as well is, if you imagine, Zoyeb, like what a typical grappler looks like, we do stand rounded and we do hunch over, right? We're in that posture, but we choose to be in that posture. That's very different from we spend all our time here, so then we have to spend time here. So if you imagine my ability, like if I'm rounded from grappling and I work all my pulling here, I get really tight in the chest here, but I want to be stronger at squeezing and choking people. My start position needs to be chest up, stomach in, and I pull here. What it's going to give me, it's going to give me greater ability to create force and to choke and to, you know, to arm drag, to do all the functional things we do. So what we're trying to do is we're training to make our grappling better. Does that make sense? So like the old school mentality would be something like this. It would be like, if you want to be able to arm drag someone, the old school mentality would be like, get some bands and just pull. But if you're just constantly doing that, that will no doubt give you like a stronger snap down. It'll give you a stronger like arm drag. But if we think about the mechanics of the body and we start to work those, when we go back to our arm drag in normal position, we have way more power. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much.
When I went to Extreme Couture in America, the Randy Couture's gym,
yeah,
the guy that taught me, I was boxing at that point, and he said to me, "Do you do a lot of pulling?" And I didn't. And he was like, "Do loads of pull-ups." And I was like, "What, for punches?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Why?" And he's like, and this was like gone 10, 15 years ago, because he goes, "The amount of force that your arm will directly relates to how strong you are this way." And I was like, I've never thought of it that way, because everything I did was like, you know, just hitting bags, punching there. And then lo and behold, when I went to the England camp, the first thing they said at England camp was, "Okay, everyone get your bands out, do your external rotation stuff." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" Because no one did that. Everyone was like, we're all old school, we just hit things. And it's like, so understanding like what our body's movement capacity is, our mobility is, and how to get stronger in those realms will ultimately make everything you do in grappling stronger and faster. Does that make sense?
Awesome. Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So it's like why you should do yoga. It's like yoga opens up the body, it creates stability, and then whatever you do, like you can use that as a practice. You don't have to change. You don't have to like suddenly grapple standing up tall and, you know, change all the way you move. You still do the movements the same, but what you'll find is your speed and your ability to move and to be malleable changes because you've got more facets of movement. So, you know, like I do Portal with Conor McGregor does all his kind of like flow stuff. Like a lot of that is play, but a lot of that is reminiscent of understanding that if you've got more ability to move, you're more agile. And I think the problem with fighters generally is that we only train in one domain. So we go, right, we just need to hit something hard or slam something down. And it's like we don't think about posture and about the longevity of what we're doing. Does that make sense?
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else, any questions?
Question about accessory work. I think I could understand eccentric work, but I was a bit. How would you recognise or what exercises you need to do for accessory work?
So, is that from a general training point of view, Chi?
Yes. No, general.
So, Katie, I guess with this, I think if you look at people's form when they're doing reps, I often talk about, say with something like deadlift, for example, I like people to have like almost like a mirror image going down and coming up. So if someone is deadlifting, like they're kind of like nice form here, they're coming up and then they're dropping down, reorganize, up, dropping down. It's like I prefer people to be able to lower down in the same way as they come up. So there's like that integrity of movement once again. So if you watch someone on the rowing machine, it's like the way in which they come forwards and backwards, you can see how they move, like where the weakness is, if there is one. So if you were doing overhead squats and your overhead squat as you come up looks different going down, obviously they're going to look different because they go in different directions. But what I mean is the body shape, that gives you little hints. Okay. So, and then the other thing as well is if you go, oh yeah, my lower back feels really tight, or it's burning more, you get those hints as a coach from your athlete. But I think kind of like that's one way you can tell, by having someone look at your movement and watch where you need to work. But I think the thing about the eccentric loading, it's not really done as much as it should be done, because people like to lift things up, or people think about the dominant movement, like I say, the direction they want to go, as opposed to the control moving the other way. So I would say, as Katie said, like understanding that if you have a direction that you want to move, you need to be able to control yourself in that equal and opposite direction. So I'm not sure if it's as simple as saying like, you do need to do it in both ways, and it's just a different way of training basically. So if you're doing pulls, like I said before, pulling and then releasing and controlling it back, it's understanding that. Katie, help me out because I'm struggling.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to, things like, and you will potentially need help from a coach to have an idea of, well, what accessory work will help me fix this. But, I think everybody who's in and around sport for any amount of time, if you looked across the gym and you were like, dude, that looks really ugly, whatever they're doing just isn't nice looking movement, you'd be able to at least identify that. And then we got to think about, okay, well, what is not ideal about how that movement's happening? And you can do it with yourself. So if I just use pull-ups for an example, on my pull-up, if I can start with my elbows forward nicely, my frontal plane, everything nice and tight in here, which means I'm using all the right big muscles, and all of a sudden my wings flare out. Well, that's a deviation from that nice smooth movement, like our games athletes who move and it looks fluid and beautiful. Whatever happens that makes that not fluid and beautiful anymore is a clue that there's something either that's not switching on and doing the right work, or isn't strong enough to help me with that work anymore, at that point. So then I'd be like, okay, well, I need to do some accessory work. That's just a general term for an exercise that's going to target that one specific thing to help me switch it on or to make it stronger. So if I know it's my lats, then I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to Google or YouTube or ask my coach, I need some exercises to help switch on and strengthen my lats, because they're not doing the job they're supposed to do, and I know that because my elbows are kicking out. You might not know that it's your lats, but what you might recognize is, oh, well, my elbows are kicking out and that just doesn't seem right. And the coach will go, okay, well, it's probably your lats, try this. Does that make sense? Is that helpful, just as a way to kind of identify what that means and what you can use that for?
Yeah, brilliant. Cool. And there's one quick more thing, just to go back to what Zeb was saying. The other thing, Zeb, I find is if you have more, like if you're more mobile, for example, so you can move in different directions and you feel more comfortable to be strong in different directions, I find that when you grapple, you relax more. So if someone pushes you into really uncomfortable positions, so they pressure pass and you haven't got the mobility to deal with it, or if someone, starts forcing you into say like a low squat or something, and you're not strong there, you start to recede, like as in you start to give away position and you lose that moment. Whereas if you're doing your strength work, you know how to squat, you know how to deadlift, you know how to press, they might seem like kind of things not relatable to grappling, but you're going to have a lot of strength in different positions that you can then use to get that moment back to your advantage. Does that make sense? As opposed to being pushed, like where you kind of go, oh, like you're getting thrown down this corridor where you're getting crushed because it's like, I'm trapped. But if you can, if you are stronger, without doubt, being strong helps grappling. Do you know what I mean? I know technique is everything, but if you are stronger from different positions, then ultimately you're going to be better off. And I think that's what, your vanilla strength gives you. It gives you strength from different positions. Cool. Any other questions at all before we wrap this up? No? Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much for that, Katie. It's been awesome doing another one with you. And like I said, what we'll do from here is we'll make the sessions more practical. So if there is anything that you guys specifically want to work on, let us know. Okay, if you let us know in the week, we've already got some ideas. Katie's already done some pistol progressions, press up progressions, pull up progressions. We've got all those things. If any of the lads, the martial art lads, want to do anything in particular, let me know, because like I say, I've done a whole sort of thing around chokes and stuff like that as well, and wrestling drills and bits and bobs there as well. So we can basically make it as diverse as you want or as focused as you want. But thank you guys for turning up, because obviously it means a lot more having you guys here instead of me and Katie just chilling out.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys. That was really good. Enjoyed
Yeah.
it.
But
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Great,
you.
guys.
Thanks, bye.
Have a nice evening, guys, and I shall catch up with you all soon.
Cheers.
Cheerio.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.